Welcome to Business Mastery with Dawn Kennedy, your quick under 45-minute dose of expert insights and strategies to make a positive impact on your business and life. Let's get started. Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Business Mastery Podcast. So one of the top reasons small businesses struggle, it has to do with capital, it has to do with cash flow and money. And I have somebody on here who's got a new perspective and a way to look at this with over 40 years experience dealing with small business. So Chip, thank you so much for joining me today.
John, thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here and talking small business. It's my favorite thing to talk about.
I love that. Can you tell everyone who you are and who you serve?
Yeah, so I'm a 40-year banker. I retired last year, and 5 or 6 years ago, I started a coaching practice called BIZZICS. And the idea, the central theme of my coaching approach is to focus on momentum and a way forward for businesses. So it applies the physics law of momentum to business. And the name, I get asked about the name all the time. And it actually had a little bit of intelligence to it. I was listening to a podcast one time, I think it was Sarah Blakely, was talking about Spanx and coming up with the name for that. And whoever the expert was said the best brand names are 7 letters or less. They either have a clicking noise or a buzzing noise. And if you can get double letters in there, it's going to be really strong. It's the combination of business and physics. We call it BIZZICS, and it sounds simple, but obviously simple things are pretty deep. They're not simplistic necessarily, but simple. So
I love that. What a great name.
So my target is really owner-managed companies. We say small business. Sometimes I resist that because I don't think there's really anything small about a dream of serving people, but owner managed up to about 10 or 15 employees is my target, and probably 5 or less years in business. You and I have talked a number of times about this statistic it's haunting. You think about the energy and capital that's put into a business and knowing that you got a 50-50 chance of making it. That's where I want to focus, is on that group of people that's in the first 5 years, because I think we can figure some things out for them.
I agree 100%. If it takes 10 years or 20 years, we just need to move that dial a little bit, right? We need to set businesses up to have a better odds of success. So my first question, let's just dive into your 40 years working in banking with small business. And we generally know that one of the reasons small businesses struggle is that access to capital or understanding kind of the financial intelligence around managing the business. So can you talk a little bit about your 40 years, what you've seen, and how that SBA business plan that everybody brings has played a role in capital or not capital? Yeah. I really want to get the stage.
Yeah, it goes way back, Dawn. But you think about starting in 1984 in banking, and we take credit scoring. It's this huge integration of an algorithm that pulls all this information and you get a score. And I literally remember on the consumer side, very early in my banking career, that we had an application that was a duplicate form. So you write everything in, and then you'd personally assign the value to, like, if they were a homeowner, if they had credit, if they had whatever. Like, we were manually scoring things that would then be audited by somebody that we never saw in the back room. And you just think about how sophisticated credit delivery has become, that you can get credit online from online lenders with very little trouble. It's just based on your credit score. And unfortunately, there's a lot that goes into it that for businesses in particular, to borrow money on a business really requires a lot of deep conversation with somebody about what you're doing and the risks that you're taking on and your own capital at risk, not just the bank, but that you have your act together. So I think what I've seen over the years is in business formation is a lot of form orientation. There's a 4-inch 3-ring binder of documents that you're supposed to complete. But my book, this book, BIZZICS, that I wrote, is really about how you move forward with the business, get traction with it, and sustain momentum over time. And there's a lot more to it than that. I think I say this all the time when I speak. I feel like most businesses run out of energy before they run out of money. And spending some time thinking about exactly what it is that you're trying to do, feeling eternally passionate about the people that you're trying to help, and knowing that it's going to be a long slog to get there, it's a reality check. And you don't have qualified people asking you hard questions about things like margins. I was with someone yesterday and they're talking about a bakery that opened up in their community, and the owner was struggling, and they just started asking some questions about, how do you know how much money you're making? And it wasn't even a mathematical component to the business. It was the idea of being a bakery on a main street in a small town. It was the romantic allure of being that person in town. And that's great. I think serving people is great. But as we say in the book, business is complicated. You really have to solve for multiple things at one time. And if you don't have that perspective going in, you understand why the statistics where they are.
Right. Yeah. The romanticizing idea of being a business owner. And I'm going to blame some of that on the internet marketing that exploded during the pandemic, right? It's 5 easy steps, have this thing. And without a whole lot of consideration for people having a second mortgage on the line or something like that, they don't really truly understand those business fundamentals. And I have seen lots of quote unquote hacks and things out there that are like, oh, if you're a retailer, then just 2.5 your wholesale cost, 2.5 your wholesale cost, you'll always make money, except for your overhead and your labor and right. There are things like that I think have been out there. So as a banker, I'm sure you've had to have those very tough conversations as well, where somebody's looking for a loan to expand, or they're looking for more capital to do something different. And you've had to look at their situation and say, I'm so sorry, this is probably not going to be good for anybody in this equation. Right. So what does that look like for you, just personally, because you are such a small business advocate? And what are the primary reasons you've maybe had to say no?
I'll answer the emotional part of saying no second. I think the reasons that we say no are, first of all, just the idea of like a universal principle of fairness and equity. You can get into all the financial gyrations about what leverage is and that type of thing. But for businesses to move forward, there's got to be a fair proportion of what the owner has and what the bank or the creditor has, because it is a physical principle that will break if it gets out of whack. It's just a law of nature that lever will not sustain itself. We get into a lot of discussions about what the borrower has in it, what the bank has in it, just to start. A lot of times there's not liquidity to put in the business, and we get into the discussion about the home as a source of equity, something that makes the bank feel better. But then you also have to look at the home as collateral, not so much net equity, like the equity that's running the business here, just trying to feel safe. So I think that's a big one. I think the second one I would say is projections, a realistic representation of what's going to happen when the money's deployed in an expansion. And I think sometimes the ramp up period is vastly overestimated how fast they can get to a break even on it. It's just things take time. Even if you have a hot brand and a hot idea, when you get to a new market, it's always a little longer than you wanted it to be. I think that's a big consideration. And then I think one of the ones that's embedded that's not even a financial like return part of it is the leadership quality to manage something bigger or with multiple locations. There's a big risk point. Who have you gathered to your team that enables you to expand by 2 or 3 times, thinking as the business owner, are you the person that's going to manage all of that? Or have you put any thought into the structure that you're building around the expansion, that you've got qualified people? And that's a really tricky point. Let's say at that point, the owner's the investor, they're completely bought in. They'll give you as much time. They'll dedicate their entire life to it, money, energy, all of it. And then all of a sudden you're getting into hires and people that don't necessarily work as long hours as you do. They don't have the commitment. It's more of a job than a passion. And you always have to pay attention to that. Is the management structure consistent with where they're going? I think the final thing always, I get back, and this is in my book, the idea of profit is so important. And again, we go back to the romanticization of being a small business owner, but it's a very important strategic principle that you're making enough money to afford the loan. It's kind of like you have the dream of building, but is the underlying operation that you've built enough to sustain the growth, or is it all pro forma based? Is it 100% that you have to have this work in order to get the loan repaid? And what banks or any creditor wants to see is there's some coverage in the system that what you built will cover most of what the expansion is from a cash flow standpoint, not the amount of capital that's needed, but the amount to repay that you figured that out. And some people get very, say trigger happy, that being very aggressive in growth plans before they're really ready for it from a durability of cash flow. And I find that particularly with franchise operations, that it's kind of like they think there's a cookie cutter. They're going to keep going. There has to be a cash flow. I would say it is hard to say no to people. I think one of the reasons I've stuck with small business as long as I have is a lot of routes that you can go in a banking career, some that are in places where you don't have as many customers and you probably get paid more. But there's something about somebody's intention coming to fruition and being helpful in a community of any kind that is very authentic and needed. I just think we need entrepreneurs to be successful because it really changes the fabric of how we live. It's really important. I'll confess on the front end, I'm probably on the more emotional side of trying to help people. I think it's innate for me that I want them to be successful. But part about saying no, and I think this is probably true of most bankers that have experience, is that when you've been through a lot of cycles, economic cycles, and just bizarre things that happen, and you see the cost of it not working, I think there's an intention there to be the catcher in the rye type of person of, I'll tell you, this isn't a good thing for you, regardless of whether the bank can get repaid. Like I've seen a lot of things, you have awareness as a banker of everybody that's trying to do everything in town. Like you're seeing deal pitches all the time. And you even have a sense of, before the business owner even does, what the competitive environment might look like. And you're playing a very important advisory role that keeps people out of trouble a lot of times. And that's what not to bash online lending, because it has been an innovation that's helped some people, but I don't think that you get that consultation with somebody that has seen a lot of things and is totally aware of what's going on in the environment. So I feel like I'm rambling on at this point, but I think if you can hold on to that one thing that'll get you over the emotional part of saying no, it's an honest spirit toward making sure people are doing things that are not harmful to themselves. It's just seeing people lose a lot over the years. It's not fun to think about people who have lost homes and all kinds of things. It's not a good thing.
Absolutely. And I really appreciate this very raw conversation about the fact that these decisions that you have to make, not only just balancing the risk, it really is in the best interest of the business owner. Because let's go to the next part. You wrote a book and everything on there. So if today somebody is in your office and you have to say no, I don't believe that you just drop the conversation. You would also say, these are the things that you could do that would move us more towards a yeah. That's important too. I think that as business owners, sometimes we forget that these relationships that we can build with professionals who are really looking out for our best interests are there to help us in the long term.
I spoke at a bank event yesterday in a small town, and I had a chance to reconnect with some banking friends down there. And there's one guy in particular that we had worked on a very difficult SBA loan for a gentleman to do an expansion. And it's probably been 6 or 7 years since I'd seen this man. And I was just like, whatever happened with that? And it turned out the guy he absolutely killed it. He's got 6 or 7 locations now. And I just said, it's not just the best when you feel like you've given the right kind of advice that you see people be successful like that. That's what we want. Everybody wants that. So I just don't know many people that enjoy a part of business that deals with business failure.
Right.
You got to have them. But I think by and large, attorneys, insurance people, bankers, CPAs, these should be the most trusted relationships that you have. And some of it feels like you can shortchange the expense and cut corners and do online bookkeeping or and it's just worth every penny. When you get a professional in your corner to guide you, it's worth every penny. You're not giving up any equity in your company to do it.
Right.
It's a cost of doing business. And I always encourage people to be out ahead of the curve, like where they are, buy the notch up on the advice. It'll pay for itself. Don't buy like what you needed yesterday. Buy what you need 3 to 5 years from now on all this advice, because it just pays off in spades when you find those kinds of relationships.
Definitely. And I do want to kind of circle back, if you will, your point about what I like to call the optimism bias of the entrepreneur. We're going to do this in 90 days. We're going to do this in a year. We're going to do this in an 18-month span of time. Let's just get
that's amazing, but a spreadsheet will do for you.
Right. Yes. Let's get down to the ground truth, because you do talk about momentum. But if we go back to the physics term, I mean, generally you want to keep going, right? So you build up that momentum and you want to keep rolling. It's not necessarily that you want to go fast and stop and then go fast and stop and go fast and stop. So what is your, I guess, perspective on the idea of it's okay to take longer and maybe have water race below the marathon?
I'm such a huge believer, Don. I'll get, I don't know the word metaphysical or very big picture with you first before I get into some other things. But this is something I firmly believe, and I say this a lot, is that if you went out in a couple of months and threw some daffodil bulbs in the ground, even the DNA that you're going to see something come out of that in about 5 or 6 months. Yeah. If you and your partner get the great news that you're expecting, it's like it's a 9-month trip. There's a certain DNA that, the way everything comes together, there's a gestation period for most things. My cosmic perspective on small business is that you are literally creating an organism that doesn't exist. It may look like a lot of other things. There's accounting and there's sales and all that type of thing. But literally, you are starting from the inside out and creating something that really doesn't exist today. And you really can't predict how long it will take. You can't predict how long it will take. I have a friend named Bobby Martin. He's a serial entrepreneur, very successful. And he wrote a book called The Hockey Stick Principles. And, what his contention is like, there's a blade of the stick that's all about tinkering. It's like you're going on this blade and it's like totally flat before you ever hit the stick, where things take off. It's trial and error, trial and error, trial and error until you figure all that out. I just feel like the perspective has to be, number one, if you go fast by copying other people, you got a value proposition problem. If you do a Me Too kind of business, you're going to get beaten up because guess what? That business already has 4 or 5 other options figured out when the competitors show up. Like they've already figured out like how they're going to react when the other bakery opens up. Be patient, three times as long and 3 times the cost. Now, I think that's a really good principle. Now, at the same time, the first 6 chapters of my book are really tightly wound around the momentum equation. It's about energy and direction and like all the physical principles. But the last 2 chapters of the book are related principles that come into play, but they're not like tightly wound into the momentum equation, and it's friction and leverage. And in those chapters, the friction chapter, talk a little bit about organizational friction. It's mostly about margins and liquidity. Like this is where your business will burn out. You're out of cash. And then the leverage chapter, the last chapter in the book, is mostly about how you build your capital stack. The proportion of equity to debt and all kinds of debt. I just don't assume that you get money. It's all going to be the same. I say in the book, money adopts the characteristics of its owner. Otherwise, it has no characteristics at all. So like there are people who want their money back faster. But all that being said, this principle of leverage is really important in getting things started, that you're realistic about what levers that you have to pull to move forward. And I've seen a lot of inexperienced people with a passion for something, get into business, decide to start a business, and they really don't have levers to pull to get the product out where it needs to be. It's like they're operating in a vacuum without a core of people that are already in that market that would promote them, or a distributor, or some type of network that they can, like amazing marketing prowess that they know how to do online marketing or whatever it is. Like there may be a competency that they have that's a lever, but inertia, it's really tough to start from zero and start pushing a rock without help. You just have to really figure out like, what are the levers that are going to move me forward, where maybe it's not 3 years, maybe it's a year and a half, because I've got this network of people who know me, they know what I do, and they're willing to buy my product and kind of get out of the gate. If you're starting based on a passion and a dream that you have, and not that I'm against young people starting businesses, there's a correlation between like your experience level and the number of people that you know, and the number of levers that you have to pull as a 25-year-old versus a 40-year-old. You've just built up a lot more equity in places where you can go with the business. I feel like I'm rambling on now, Don, but there's a lot. There's a lot to it, and I think that there's something, I don't know, there's something very powerful about the idea of having the courage to start a business that I feel very protective of. that if you have that call and you really have a passion, you have an idea about how you're going to do it better than everybody else, I want you to be successful in finding that. But let's just be realistic on the front end about what that's going to look like. And one of the people we were talking about yesterday, I was hearing the story, is like they didn't have it figured out. They started a business up and go into the capital stack. Like their equity was credit card money. And then they had literally 6 figures of credit card debt invested in the business at 18 to 20%. And that too, be patient. If you have the idea, start saving to get to your first tipping point of you've got the product. You're ready, you're ready to go to market because of the savings that you put aside to support yourself in doing that. It's just incredibly important to have that kind of equity in it, getting started and having some staying power.
Yeah, it's a great point. And back to that statistic, the SBA estimates that second and third time entrepreneurs are going to be 20 to 30% more likely to be successful in their second or third venture within that 50%. I don't know. It's just, I don't math, right? I just read the statistics. But if you fall, you skin your knee, you bruise your elbow, maybe you close your first business. But we actually never really hear about the first business that didn't work. We hear about the third one, the big successful one. But in your banking career, how many times did you have those serial entrepreneurs that made it in that third business because of the experience that they had? Because maybe
people don't like to talk about it.
Let's talk. We're going to talk about it.
It is a prevalent thing. And I found a lot of times it's not necessarily a solopreneur starting over and over again 3 or 4 times. It's a lot of times it's the wisdom of knowing that a team is necessary to do it financially and from an energy standpoint. You can give up on the idea that you're always going to own 100% of it, and bringing partners in that balance it out. That's a huge step forward in the psyche of the entrepreneur that, hey, it's okay. We're going to get to a point, and I think we can all agree up to this point, and then maybe we'll have an agreement about how we're going to part ways. But it's a different perspective the second and third and fourth time around. And you've got to have, even this is I get asked all the time when I was writing the book, people say, was there going to be something in there about sustaining momentum? And I was like, yeah, definitely. Because if you're plateauing, like the bank gets nervous when sales are flat. It's not just when you get the 45-degree downslope. It's like when nothing's happening, we're already nervous at the bank because relatively to inflation and everything else, you're falling behind. But in the book, when I talk about sustaining momentum, this idea of tinkering pops up in order to sustain momentum. Like you have to have a spirit toward continued failure to continue your momentum, because you're reading the landscape and you're willing to try things with the shotgun over the cannon. I can't remember which book that was, but you have to be experimenting with things all the time. And if you go into it with the idea that you're going to be perfect, you're going to hit your first time. You're not going to ever fail. You'll never find the way forward where you've tinkered around with something, and all of a sudden it's an idea that will grow to the size of your current business or greater. I think that's just a big part of sustaining momentum is you have to have that spirit toward failing and learning. It's just part of entrepreneurship.
Yeah, but that is not widely taught by the SBA. That is not widely taught by SCORE. Not throwing everybody who gets into small business advisory, I truly believe really wants to help. Yeah. Main Street does so much employment, right? So we want those jobs to stay, but we don't actually talk about this maybe in those MBA courses or in those SBA.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but this is popped in my head that's just a reality. It goes back to equity and what you're starting and what you're personally investing in. When you've saved up some money, and I'm gonna start a t-shirt shop. I'm gonna do it on the weekends. I'm gonna have a pop-up restaurant or whatever. You're tinkering along, you're nursing it along, and then all of a sudden you don't like doing it anymore, or there's something that comes up. I just found I couldn't scale, so I stopped. That's one type of business failure. There's another type, which is the person who's putting no money in and borrowing it all, and they bankrupt. And there are many people that are bankrupted and come back in a glorious way. But when you're dealing with lenders, even investors, to make that decision and fail on like a big scale failure that affects your credit and all of your standing and reputation in the community and everything, like it's really hard to come back for that. And I just there's credit repair and there's things you can do. But when you get down to, that's when you start picking up partners, you start collecting the information. There's 3 people and You get all the information on two of them really fast. And it's weird. Where's Bill's stuff? Where's Bill's stuff? And you get it in and the box is checked. Bankrupt. And it's the one guy, maybe it's the idea person, but serial entrepreneurship is difficult and it can be done. But I would just say scale your investment, knowing you're going to fail, scale it to where you're not taking on a lot of debt with your first venture. Yeah. Because it's people that hit it the first time, it can be a little bit dangerous too, that they feel a little bit invincible, but it just doesn't happen very often. It doesn't happen very often. So make sure it's your own money when you're first out there at the highest level of risk. And then there's a lot of capital out there. Banks are one form of capital, but I find more and more angel investing. There are people who have been successful that want to invest. And if you can show them that it's working, I think you got a really good chance of getting other capital in your business that's not debt. And you'll find out, like in the end, did it matter that you had 100% of something doing $1 million in sales when you could have had 80% of something doing 10 million in sales? Right. It's like, start waking up to that reality of it's okay. It's okay to have a partner. Anyway, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great answer to the question. So let's talk about this idea. Like you said, people were asking you, does it teach you how to sustain momentum? I find that's an interesting question. And the reason I find that an interesting question is because if you, let's say, had a small hardware store or department store and it's passed down 5 or 6 or 8 generations, we could argue that it was sustaining momentum through the ages. Why do people wonder whether or not you can sustain your business once you've done the tweaking, and if you're forward thinking and you're starting to do the tweaks and the trials and the errors, and you're very intentional about each step that you make? Why would people wonder whether or not it's sustainable? I'm interested in your answer. Is it because that they're not maybe realizing that there are forces outside of your own decision-making that force you to think differently or have a new perspective? The biggest example I can come up with was a few years ago, the media was all over quiet quitting and employees and HR and that kind of thing. And small businesses maybe felt they had to adapt or manage some of that. But why would someone ask once we get started? Isn't it's momentum sustainable?
I think we have the profile of the person asking that question isn't the person starting up. I think that question comes, I think, at a point in the company's history where the owner has plateaued with their own energy and investment in the company. And they're trying to figure out, how do we get more energy, more ideas so that there are growth opportunities here? It doesn't, like, the person starting is not worried about like 10 years from now when they're going to sustain it. It's always someone that is just starting to get to that point. I don't know if I'm in it. I don't know if I have kids that are interested in it. I'm trying to figure out like where this is going to go. And I think that's where the momentum equation, the principles of momentum, really start to take root about what underlies the whole thing. It's like, you've got to start with an energy field, right, that you feel continuing passion for the people that you're helping. And you feel like there's more and more people that you're able to help with your business model. Some business models started based on a market that's not growing or shrinking. And it requires a lot of innovation to move forward, to think about, how am I going to do business now when people are using a landline phone or whatever it is? Things are going to change. But I think what I preach in the book is that from the time that you start, you've got to have a constant vision on the industry that you're in and where the opportunities are. And this is where I think the energy to get started and start rolling that rock is so great that when it gets started, the business owner can lose the energy for what's going on, even things that would impact them before you get into growth ideas. But just to have that perspective, like, it looks like everything is headed here. What am I doing about it? And what can my people do about it? And you start recognizing gaps in your resources, your energy level, how energized your people are about what you're doing. If you can bring a lot of energy to it and an empowered culture of people noticing things that are opportunities, you'll find things. And there's a lot of different case studies in the book, but one of the ones that I love that's in the momentum chapter, which is really about sustaining momentum, is a local, can't even call it a CPA firm because it's so huge now. But when we first started dealing with them at the bank, they were, I think, 4 partners, former Big 8 back when they were 8. They had the Big 8 pedigree. They started an accounting firm and it became very successful. And then one day we had a meeting with them. They're like, hey, we've decided we're going to start a payroll company. And we're like, what? You're a CPA for it's like 1995 or something. It was like unheard of, like CPAs or CPAs. And that company is now like the largest financial service provider in the Southeast. And they do the CPA audit work. All the big middle market firms use them. It's a large CPA practice. We got a payroll business. They got an IT business. They have an investment business. And I think it's just, again, what can it be? How big can it be? And I'm willing to spend the time tinkering about, man, wouldn't that be great if we were getting that too? Not every business is going to be that way, but the business I was in yesterday when I was speaking, they had started with the storefront, Main Street storefront. They literally had 4 different things running in that building 7 years later. And it was all adjacent kind of things that all came together. So I just think when people, this is an E-Myth principles that Michael Gerber, I love his E-Myth book. He says it so well in there. If your reason for starting a business is to leave a job that you hate or a boss that you hate, like you're not going to last very long.
Yeah.
There really has to be like some sense that you have a purpose in the world that's going to change people's lives, that things that they're doing or buying today, you could make it so much better and give people a lot more satisfaction, because if all it is like the paycheck, it won't last. And I tell people there's no shame in not starting. Just make sure what you're getting into. You don't want to fail. You can't guarantee success in anything in life, but the 50-50 chance to me is just a showstopper. Like, why is that number still so high? And is there a population of people that they just really need someone on the front end to show them the way of what's going to be required for them to move forward? And what I've tried to do with my book is to say, when you distill through it all and you realize that there's a principle like momentum here that affects you and me in our lives, things that we're trying to do, it affects your business. You're dealing with a physical, a law of the universe that will crush you if you're not careful. Like, it's a wake-up call. It's trying to defy that there's gravity out there. It's just like trying to defy some master thing. And if you don't have the energy and you don't have a specific direction for the business, you can talk about adding the mass later. You need a certain amount to start down the road. But how many people can tell you exactly where they're headed when they start? And, what I preach in the book, it's if you accept that mass and velocity are the 2 variables, and velocity in physics is a vector, and a vector requires a direction, a distance, and a speed. Could you tell me that about your business? Exactly where you're headed, how far, and over what time period? And if you can't answer that question, how do you have momentum? It's like in the book, I talk about pinwheel firework. Angular momentum, the circular momentum is important in some ways, but when you're starting, if all you're doing is spinning around a dream and you don't have a purposeful direction for it that you can articulate to people, I don't know how you go anywhere. I really don't. It's more feeling good. They are not things that satisfy the equation at all. And I think that, I don't know. I think the SBA has done a lot of great work. Talk a lot about their loan program in the book. That it's something I admire because they've tried to make debt as permanent a piece of capital as possible. There aren't loan maturities or calls or covenants. Like when you get the loan, you got it. Unless you stop paying, like you've got it, which is not the case with banks all the time. But I think the preparation part can be very formulaic about their stack of documents that you're working through that doesn't cut through to the heart of what makes it work.
No, I appreciate that very much, because the intentionality required to get started and do business, right? Small business is not always there at a level, I think, like to your point, how long it really actually could take and how long it takes to get into market entry with that early adopter and then into the early majority, those types of things. I don't know that they do a good job maybe with this formulaic process in setting those expectations. Is here's your financing, go open, have your ribbon cutting, how exciting, don't miss any payments. And correct me if I'm wrong, if that's too simplistic, but it a lot of times feels like that is really the root reason that people will take the SBA path. I appreciate so much just really how deep your advice is, that this is something that you're going to wrap your arms around and take with you for a long time. And you should, from the outset, try to start figuring those things out.
Yeah.
I love it. All right. Where can people find your book? Because everybody
my
needs
book,
to get the book.
yeah. My book is on Amazon. We've got hardback audio and a Kindle version. It's an easy read. It's 200 pages. There's lots of good stories in there, some things you'll recognize, the things that I've been involved in. If you'll look up BIZZICS On Demand, that's my new AI agent for the book. It's as good as talking to me, if not better. I think the synapses for the artificial intelligence are probably better than mine at my age, but I think that's a big advancement too for accessibility for small business owners, is that you can literally interact with the book. So if you look up BIZZICS On Demand, there's a free trial and it's like $15 a month or something, but compared to $1,000 a month for a really seasoned coach, I think you can cover a lot of bases very affordably. Please look at all that and let me hear from you. I really love this. Obviously, hopefully my energy and passion for it is coming through in this, Don. I just think that it's really one of the most amazing things for someone to take the risk to help people in a broad way like this. And I really just want to do whatever I can to make that happen for people. It's just every community, our society needs like that level of thinking and creativity to make things different for people. So if I can help, let me know.
Amazing. So we're going to put the link to the book and the AI tools down inside the show notes and the description. So if you're watching or listening to this the day it comes out, or even 2 or 3 years later, you can find BIZZICS Way and Chip.
Let me say, let's say one more thing too that I overlooked. If you want forms, I got forms. If you buy the book, there's a QR code in the book at the end of every chapter. It'll take you to a resource center. I've got probably 25 planning tools. I got a business plan, marketing plan. I got an energy check. If you want to check your energy, there's a nice inventory in there. There's a lot of profit tools. There's a lot of things in there that will align to the book as you're reading it, which hopefully puts a lot of that in perspective as you're going through and thinking about what you want to work on. So I didn't want to go without saying that.
Yeah, definitely. All the resources that are coming from somebody with 40 years in small business, I would definitely get the book and check it out. Thank you so much for this conversation today.
Don, thank you. I love talking to other experts, and thank you for all you do. I think the more we resource people, the better off we all are. So thank you for having me on today.
I appreciate that so much. All right. We'll talk to y'all next time on the next episode of the Business Mastery Podcast. Take care. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Business Mastery Podcast. If you want to learn more about me, you can go to DawnKKennedy.com, and you can now check us out on YouTube, as well as, of course, any of your favorite platforms that host podcasts. Take care.